And what is going on, Devils fans? As always, it is your boy, your host, your confidant, your number one source, Neil Villapiano, and welcome to a very jam-packed edition of the Devil's State of Mind podcast, right here on the Hockey Podcast Network, as well as Sports Wire Radio, the best place to get everything you need to know about your very, very busy New Jersey Devils. And as always, guys, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to check these episodes out. You already know that I greatly appreciate everything that you guys do to help support the podcast day in and day out. And as always, shout out to our sponsors down below. Of course, we got SeatGeek. Use my promo code Devil State of Mind. You get $20 off your first purchase. So make sure you use that promo code. Also, as always, DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of not only the Devil State of Mind podcast, but of course, the Hockey Podcast Network as well. And you know what? Use our promo code THPN and you bet just $5, you get $200 instantly in risk-free bets. And with the NBA and Stanley Cup Finals going on right now, Major League Baseball, we are getting ready to get into the swing of things in terms of the summer and really the nitty-gritty of the season and so much else going on. DraftKings is your number one destination to get in on all of the huge money prizes. So again, sign up with DraftKings Sportsbook and use promo code THPN. And as always, fans, make sure to bet responsibly. And last but certainly not least, a shout out as always to Horns of Tail Napa Valley, the official wine club of the New Jersey Devils and also the official wine sponsor of the Devil's State of Mind podcast. And use my promo code down below, Devil State, to get 10% off all of your orders. So as always, shout out to all of our wonderful sponsors here with the Devil's State of Mind podcast. We have so much to talk about here on this edition of the Devil's State of Mind podcast. We are going to be talking about goalie rumors. We're going to be talking about some forward rumors as well. The Devils finalized their coaching staff by adding one newcomer to Sheldon Keefe's staff, and we will talk about that. We'll also talk a little bit about the Four Nations face-off and what you guys can expect from it when it comes around. And last but certainly not least, we are going to check in on the local women's hockey team from the PWHL, the New York team, as they just finished up earlier this week their draft for 2024. And we'll talk about who New York selected and all of the draft picks that they had in this draft. And we will also give you an update as to what you can expect going in to season number 2 of the PWHL. So, as always, hockey fans, we have a bunch to get to here on the Devil's State of Mind podcast. So let's not waste any more time and get rolling. And we will get rolling and drop the puck with a couple of things I want to do right before we really get underway. As you can see, if you are watching here on YouTube, if you are not, make sure you go subscribe to the Devil's State of Mind podcast on YouTube. I am wearing a lovely shirt here that has the Devils logo on the back. And I don't know if you guys can really see here, but I have Nico Heischer on the back. And that was actually made and given to me by a supporter of the podcast and a good friend of mine. Her name is Chrissy. And if you want to follow her, she's on Twitter at NJD Chrissy over on Twitter. So Chrissy, thank you so much again for this shirt. I know I thanked you when you gave it to me at the last home game this past year, but still just wanted to say thank you so very much for this shirt. And I can already see on your Twitter that you're making a lot of other cool stuff. So again, Devils fans, I highly recommend you go check out what she makes because she is very talented and a lot of it is Devils related. So I wanted to shout her out. And the other shout out that I wanted to give a shout out to is a couple of gifts that I got from the Rangers Ed podcast, which you guys know that I've been, working with a bunch over the last couple of years. And Little Ed's Workshop sent me something that's very, very cool. A wooden made Jack Hughes jersey. If you guys saw on my socials at Devil State on Twitter and on Instagram at Devil State of Mind, you saw that I got this. It was absolutely phenomenal. Something I did not expect. It comes from, as it says on on the bottom here, Little Ed's Workshop. They also are on Instagram at Little Ed's Workshop. And make sure to use my promo code Devil's State of Mind to get an offer from them to get a customized one of your own. And as always, tell them that your boy Neil Villapiano sent you. So, Rangers Ed Podcast, appreciate you guys so much. Little Ed, appreciate you, man, for the awesome gift. And also, I got this. Now, I was actually a sponsor for a golf outing that the Ed's podcast was a part of. As you can see here, it's for the Life for Evan Foundation. So as you can see here, Devil's State of Mind, New Jersey Devils Podcast. Follow on Instagram and Twitter. And you can subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and all other podcast platforms. And I was one of the sponsors of this of that golf charity event. So thank you guys so much for giving me that and all the gifts. Thank you to Chrissy again for the shirt. Just wanted to give a couple of thank yous to people who have been very generous to me in giving me this really, really cool gift. So again, thank you all so very much. So with that out of the way, now let's shift into our first topic here. We're already about 7 minutes in. So I think you guys, I think it's time that we kind of get into this. And we're going to start with talking about the rumor that does not die, and that is involving Calgary Flames goaltender Jacob Markstrom. So here is where we are at the time of this recording. TSN and the Athletic Hockey insider Pierre LeBrun reports conversations are taking place between the Devils and the Flames on Jacob Markstrom. Now, as we all know, talks were going on up until the trade deadline. Nothing materialized. But everybody speculated, especially Pierre LeBrun, about if the Devils and Flames were going to re-engage. And that's exactly what is going on here. And again, if you remember, the Devils had a deal done that was going to send Markstrom to the Garden State, but the deal fell through. And LeBrun reported in March that one holdup in a trade was the Flames' unwillingness to retain salary on Markstrom, who is signed through 2025-26 at a cap hit of $6 million. So if the Devils are able to acquire Markstrom, not only would they have them for this upcoming season, but they would have him for the following year as well. And again, Markstrom has a full no-move clause in his contract, but according to LeBrun, his understanding is that Markstrom is without a doubt willing to make a move and waive his no-trade clause to go to New Jersey. And that's really where we are. And that was the overall feeling even in March. So once again, we're in this situation where it's kind of a waiting game. It kind of feels like at this point that it's not about if a Markstrom trade is going to happen, but more about when. And I know that this has been talked about a lot over the last couple of days because Tom Fitzgerald did say out loud per NHL.com that he is very much willing to trade the 10th overall pick for something significant that can help them win now. And the overall feeling that I'm getting from many Devils fans is that the Devils are going to, quote unquote, have to trade the number 10 pick at least to acquire Markstrom. And I'm here to really tell you guys that honestly and truly, that's unlikely to happen because of the situation that the Flames are in, where Markstrom, I think at this point, wants to move, and that really the Flames don't have a ton of leverage. And I've spoken about it before, where I think it's more likely the Devils can get Markstrom for very little. And yes, I think that they will. I don't think any salary retention will happen, but I still think that the Devils are going to give up very little to acquire Markstrom. Now, it should also be mentioned that Pierre LeBrun said that there are other teams interested in Markstrom, particularly the Ottawa Senators and the Toronto Maple Leafs, two other teams that certainly need an upgrade in goaltending. And LeBrun also said, quote, there's still a difference of opinion on return on what it should cost the Devils to get Jacob Markstrom out of Calgary, and the Flames are willing to be patient in terms of having a team meet their price. And also, per Elliot Friedman, it really depends when it comes to what team you're talking to about trying to get Markstrom. It depends on who you're asking, meaning the price seems to be different for every team. I don't know if that's to try to drive the price up or whatever, but that's kind of where we are at. Now, Bruce Garrioch of the Ottawa Citizen reported that the Senators are exploring a Markstrom trade while also saying that the Devils are the favorites to acquire the netminder. And in the article in the Ottawa Citizen, Garrioch wrote, quote, while the New Jersey Devils are considered the front runner in trying to acquire Markstrom, a league executive stated that Staios, the owner of the Senators, and the Senators have held several discussions with the Calgary Flames general manager, Craig Conroy, to see if they can find a fit to make a deal. And lastly here, Chris Johnson on his podcast talking about Jacob Markstrom said, quote, I have to believe the New Jersey Devils get this done, end quote. He's not reporting the trade framework is done, but it feels like all the ingredients are there to get a trade done with New Jersey eventually. And even as I'm talking about this, there are reports that the Flames are very, very willing to drag this out. And they also believe that they could potentially convince Markstrom that this Flames team is ready to win now. I completely disagree with that. And I even think that there are Flames fans who completely disagree with that. A lot of Flames fans that I've seen are very much big on moving Markstrom. And again, I really don't believe that the 10th overall pick is going to go the other way. I think that the Flames are going to try, and maybe they'll try to do some negotiation, maybe try to do some salary retention, maybe add another player, whoever that might be. But I don't think that Tom Fitzgerald is going to budge because he knows that giving up the 10th overall pick for Markstrom would be immediately an overpayment. If you're just giving up the 10th overall pick to acquire Markstrom, I even think then you would consider it to be an overpayment. So I think the bottom line here is that the Devils are going to do what they can to get Markstrom, but I also don't believe that they may wait on him that long because Tom Fitzgerald, I believe, wants to get a goalie settled here in New Jersey either before the draft or certainly before free agency so he can focus on everything else. Signing RFAs like Dawson Mercer and obviously adding to this team in the top and bottom six, respectively, and adding a penalty kill defenseman as well. So the bottom line here is that once again, as per usual, we are kind of in the waiting game. We are getting rumors left and right, and Jacob Markstrom continues to be the guy that seems like it's all but certain that he's probably going to end up in New Jersey. But we don't know until things are finalized, so we will continue to wait and see. Now, staying on the goaltending, carousel here, there are two other names that have come up. And I'm not going to bring up Yusei Saros because at this point, it seems very likely that Saros and the Predators are going to get a long-term deal done. Saros doesn't want to leave, and it doesn't sound like the Predators want to trade him unless they get a blowaway deal. And I don't think the Devils, nor really any other team, is going to really make that major push. I could be wrong, but I think it's very unlikely at this point that Yusei Saros has any chance of being a New Jersey Devil moving forward. But there are two other guys. The first guy to talk about really quick is Linus Ullmark of the Boston Bruins. Now, again, this is in the same thing with Pierre LeBrun talking about these other two goaltenders. LeBrun notes that Boston Bruins goaltender Linus Ullmark could also be an option for the team on the trade market. Ullmark looks to be out the door in Boston with Jeremy Swayman, without question going to be the number one guy moving forward. And Ullmark is slated to go to free agency at the end of this upcoming season. He is a Vezina Trophy winner back in 2022-23 in that historic season for the Boston Bruins. And he has $5 million left on his contract here. He also has a modified no trade clause and reportedly, if you remember right before the deadline, rejected a deal out west, which I assume was the Los Angeles Kings, but we don't know for certain. Now, would he want to come to New Jersey? He'll have to be extended if the Devils want to make him a long-term player for this team. And it's a matter of, are the Devils going to be willing to pay what Ullmark may want? He may want an uptick in money moving forward, $6-7 million. And for a guy like Ullmark, who, yes, has had a ton of success, has won a Vezina Trophy. He was a guy several years ago on this podcast when he was in Buffalo that I said the Devils should go after. The reality is that he's not super proven. Is Markstrom super proven? Not. I mean, it's about the same, I think, in my opinion. But it's really kind of an interesting thing with that because you wonder just how much the Devils would have to give up if they were going to get Ullmark. I mean, again, he has a no-move clause. So the Devils could very well work out a deal where they don't give up much to get Ullmark either. And then Ullmark might be like, all right, fine, I'll make the move to New Jersey. But I just see it being very difficult. I think Allmark does get moved. I just don't know if New Jersey's the spot that he would want to go to. Although Allmark would become the number one guy right away with Jake Allen being the backup. But again, the thing about it with Allmark is that you only have him under team control for one season. And then next year, you got to think about long-term contract with him while you have other guys eventually that you have to pay, like a Luke Hughes, like a Simone Nemitz, and other guys like that. So I think that that's the second most likely guy that the Devils go after, but I think it's a distant second because I think that the Devils would like to have a little bit more control and a little bit more time to figure this out long term. So that's the way that I look at it. Now, the other guy brought up is John Gibson of the Anaheim Ducks, a guy that had been brought up before, but has never really been talked about that much. As for John Gibson, LeBrun reports the Ducks are listening to offers on Gibson, who remains signed through the 2026-27 season at a cap hit of $6.4 million. He's currently 30 years of age and coming off a year where he went 13-27-2 with a .888 save percentage, which is without question the worst mark of his career, and a 3.54 goals against average. The reality with John Gibson is that you are still unsure as to whether or not he just needs to go to a better team or if he's really kind of at the point of his career where he's really, really starting to decline. I think that's kind of where we're looking at here with this. And the problem with John Gibson is that while he's under team control for several years more than Jacob Markstrom, that $6.4 million is a lot of money to pay for a guy for another 3-4 years. And again, you still have to think about the long-term contracts of your young players that I mentioned before. So this is where, and this is what goes through Tom Fitzgerald's mind when he's thinking about these deals. Again, John Gibson, I think, would be maybe a third option or a fourth option, but again, distant, even distant from Allmark. I think, again, it's going to lean much more to Jacob Markstrom because he has term, but not for too long, where the Devils could give Nico Daws, Akira Schmid, Isaac Poulter at least 2 more years to develop and then take over at a much less cap hit than what Jacob Markstrom or any of these goaltenders I'm mentioning would be at. So that's kind of the way that I think Fitzgerald is thinking about it. But John Gibson is certainly an option, no doubt. But again, it should be noted that Tom Fitzgerald is willing to move the number 10 overall pick. And even in the NHL.com piece, he did say, quote, if we feel it helps us now and in the foreseeable future, then yes, I'm listening. I haven't gotten anything yet, but the more I talk to teams, I say, listen, I'm open to moving number 10, but it's going to have to be something significant. That's kind of the thing that Tom Fitzgerald wanted to make a point that it's got to be significant. Even acquiring Markstrom, I don't believe is significant enough to justify trading the number 10 overall pick. Who that player or players that might be, I don't know. And it's very possible the Devils could still use the number 10 overall pick at the end of this month to draft somebody that could help continue to make the farm system a strength for this team. But you do have the option to use it to get some win now guys to really make that aggressive push to winning a Stanley Cup. And that's the way that I look at it. Now, I did want to say one thing also from that article with Tommy Fitz that interested me. He also commented on other areas of his team in terms of improvement that's needed. He said that the Devils would like to add more size, edge, and physicality at forward. And here's the comment. The quote is, quote, we're a little too vanilla up front, end quote. It's nice to hear that Fitzgerald kind of feels that this team needs to beef up a bit and needs to not be so, as he put it, vanilla. So that's where I see, this team moving forward in terms of what they might add in terms of getting this team to be more of a playoff team, more of a balanced team like the Florida Panthers, who currently are 2 wins away from winning the Stanley Cup. I've brought up Florida before about being that really good example of just building a team. So that's kind of the way that I look at it with that. And He also, Fitzgerald talked about adding another piece in the blue line, saying, I'm looking on the back end as well for something. I believe that Brendan Dillon is the top target because of his, defensive prowess, his physicality. He's a solid puck moving defenseman, and I don't think he'll cost very much. He did tell the Winnipeg Jets that he's going to test free agency, so I definitely think he's going to be on the Devils' radar for sure, but there's other names as well that we will certainly get into when we get a little bit closer to the July 1st beginning of free agency. But that's where we are in terms of the goaltending rumors. I still believe that Jacob Markstrom is the most likely guy, but things can turn very quickly. So it's important to try to, stay up to date with everything that's going on. And I will continue to keep you guys updated on all social media and, of course, here on the podcast as well. And it's getting down to it, guys. I think that we're much closer to a goalie deal happening than we were originally maybe a couple of weeks ago. So buckle your seatbelts, folks, because I think things are getting very, very interesting here. Now, let's talk about two forwards that I would say probably are unlikely that the Devils would even consider going after them, but it's been talked about to an extent here or there that maybe the Devils may try to make a move, maybe they won't. And we'll start with Winnipeg Jets forward Nikolai Ehlers. Now, here's a report from David Pagnotta of the Fourth Period earlier this past week suggesting that Ehlers won't be willing to sign a long-term extension in Winnipeg. A source close to Ehlers wouldn't confirm that to the Winnipeg Sun, only saying he's got 1 year left on his deal, which is at $6 million, also has a 10-team no-trade clause. So if the Devils are on that, there's no point in even discussing this. And they'll see where it goes. They've also added there's a constant dialogue with Winnipeg Jets general manager Kevin Cheveldayoff. Now, per the Winnipeg Sun, the Devils, along with the Boston Bruins, Seattle, Ottawa, Columbus, and Carolina are rumored to be suitors for the winger. Now, we've talked about, and I've talked about at length in my end of the season kind of previewing what I wanted to see the Devils do in terms of their offseason checklist, that the Devils, in my opinion, needed to find somebody, whether within their organization or outside of it, to fit on the wing with Jack, to be that scoring guy like Tyler Toffoli was. I doubt that Tyler Toffoli ends up being that guy moving forward because of the fact that they couldn't get a deal done right before the trade deadline. Nikolai Ehlers, again, you would be acquiring him for 1 year, and then you would have to think about paying him long term. And you wonder to yourself, what is he going to be asking for? Well, if he's making $6 million now, you're starting to look at the $7.58 million range, and you wonder, is that something that you want to pay when you have some other guys that maybe are a little bit more of a higher priority than Nikolai Ehlers? And I've talked about before how I would love to have Nikolai Ehlers on this team. I've wanted him on the Devils for several years. I just don't think that there's much here. I don't even think that Nikolai Ehlers ends up getting dealt right now. Maybe he becomes a trade deadline piece. Again, it would be very tough because then you have to think about what would you give up for him? What's his value on the trade market? There's a lot there. There is, but again, even reading this, there's nothing saying that like Ehlers is definitely getting dealt, but considering the fact that it doesn't seem like that he might be staying in Winnipeg long term, and because of the Devils, with the young prospects and picks, they could certainly add to that. But he would fit more of what a lot of the Devils already have, that smaller stature, speedy scoring. And the question is, does Tom Fitzgerald want to add another guy to the team that he says, quote, is a little bit too vanilla up front? I doubt it, but the Devils were mentioned, and it's something to just kind of talk about with you. Now, the other guy who the Devils have been rumored to maybe go after in the past is once again looking like he's very much out the door with his team, and that is Patrick Laine of the Columbus Blue Jackets. And this we found out earlier today. I'm recording this on June 12th. So this was a couple of hours ago that we saw this. The Columbus Blue Jackets are mutually working with Patrick Laine to trade the 26-year-old forward. Pierre LeBrun reported on Wednesday on his Wednesday edition of Insider Trading. And LeBrun said in the insider trading piece, and he said, quote, "That's the goal from everyone involved. Laine would like to move on. His agent has had conversations with the Blue Jackets about it, and both sides are going to work together to try and get that done. He wants a fresh start. Hasn't been a good time in Columbus." Now, it should be mentioned also that Laine entered the player assistance program back on January 28th and still remains in the program as of today, according to Pierre LeBrun. And yeah, it's fair to say that Patrick Laine has certainly not enjoyed himself in Columbus, and it's clearly obvious that it looks like he does need a fresh start. He tallied just 6 goals and 9 points in 18 games this year. He missed 9 games earlier this year with a concussion back in October before sustaining a broken clavicle on December 14th when they were taking on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, the thing that is going to make it difficult for the Blue Jackets to find a deal is the fact that Laine still has 2 years left on his contract at an $8.7 million cap hit. He also does have a 10-team no-trade list. So things are going to be very difficult. And the reason why I'm even talking about this is because if the Devils want to get a guy who has some control, at least a little bit more than Ehlers, you could definitely reach out to Columbus and see what they're asking for, see if there's a deal possible. Without question, I think any team that acquires Laine is getting him at salary retention. And I think if the Devils could get Laine where the retention, the Devils are only paying like 3.54 million for him to play on Jack's wing, I think would be great. Now, Laine certainly had his criticisms over the years in terms of his lack of hustle in the defensive zone and trying to play a 200-foot game, in terms of, his speed. But the one thing that people cannot deny is his goal scoring ability. He has a nose for the goal. I would like to say that sometimes he's considered to be a younger version of Tyler Toffoli with what people might say, quote unquote, attitude problems. And obviously coming off of this, substance program, whenever he comes out, there's some risk with that as well. And we saw that with Valerie Nichushkin in the middle of the playoffs this year with Colorado. So again, the Devils, I don't think are going to be thinking about it too much I don't think they're going to be thinking about any of this until they get the goalie situation assessed. And it's not even been reported that the Devils are interested, but I've certainly seen people today talking about if the Devils could get Laine on a retained salary deal, and not have to give up very much, which I don't think they would, because it's going to be tough to move Laine anyway. It could very well work out, and Laine would come to a team that probably at this point in his career would give him the best chance to not only redeem himself, but to win. And to add, a young guy who fits in age-wise with a lot of the young team that we have, I think could be something. And you have him for 2 years. So it's something to kind of keep in mind. Would love to know your guys' thoughts on it. I'm sure I'm already getting, opinions on it on social media, but just wanted to mention it. In 480 career games, Laine has scored 204 goals, added 184 assists for a total of 388 points. So he is only 12 points shy of 400. This is also, by the way, with him only being 26 years of age. So in terms of the age-wise, he still kind of fits where the Devils are. So just some forwards to keep in mind that could be on the top 6 that they could acquire via trade. There's also going to be some free agents out there that we'll talk about as well when we get a little bit closer to that. But just some more rumors in this part of the season, and things are only going to ramp up as we get closer and closer to the draft. Of course, free agency as well. And I don't think it'll be that much longer before the Devils really start making some moves here. So now I want to shift to some actual news here to talk about with you guys. And it involves the finalization of the Devils coaching staff. And there was really only one spot that needed to be filled. There was a lot of talk about, who is Sheldon Keefe going to keep? Who is he not? And yesterday, or on Tuesday of this week, the Devils announced that Jeremy Colleton would be coming on to Sheldon Keefe's staff as an assistant coach. Colleton completes the on-ice coaching staff, which includes the following assistants: Ryan McGill, Chris Taylor, Sergey Brylin, and unfortunately for a lot of us, goaltending coach Dave Rogalski. And I have no problem with the Jeremy Colleton hire. I actually think it's going to be a solid one. I think he brings a lot to the table at a guy who's just 39 years of age, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. I'm just kind of surprised that Sheldon Keefe has kept as many of the assistants as he did. Um, keeping it's tough to say. Keeping Chris Taylor wasn't, fond of it. Ryan McGill was fine. Sergey Brylin, obviously. But the big one was obviously Dave Rogalski. I wasn't really a fan of the fact that he still has a job with this team, considering the fact of the track record in terms of just not really having much to kind of go off of in terms of just success. Yeah, VTech Vanacek and Kira Schmid, 2 seasons ago, but other than that, I mean, not much. Now, Josh Langer on Twitter, or aka Devils.fan page on Instagram, he actually tweeted this out earlier today. He said, goalies that have played for the Devils since Dave Rogalski took over as goaltending coach back in October of 2020. Mackenzie Blackwood, Scott Wedgwood, Aaron Dell, Eric Comrie, Andrew Hammond, Nico Dawes, Akira Schmid, Jonathan Bernier, John Gillies, Vitek Vanacek, Jake Allen, and Capo Kakinen. And that doesn't include Corey Crawford, who was close to suiting up, but as we know, ultimately retired. And we could also add Kyle Shapiro as well as emergency backup for one game. It's very puzzling why Dave Rogalski is still given this opportunity. I mean, unless it's because he's just so close with Marty Brodeur, I don't see another reason why. So yeah, most of the coaching staff remains the same, except obviously the head coach, Sheldon Keefe, and our new assistant coach, Jeremy Colleton. Now let's talk about Jeremy Colleton, because that's really what we're talking about here. He was most recently the head coach of the Abbotsford Canucks, which is the Vancouver Canucks AHL affiliate, for the past 2 seasons. And in his 2 regular seasons at the helm, he posed an identical records of 40, 25, and 7, and both years led them to the Calder Cup playoffs. So he obviously has had some recent success in the AHL. Now, most people know Jeremy Colleton from his head coaching experience as the head coach of the Chicago Blackhawks for parts of 4 seasons from 2018-19 to 2021-22. At the time of his hiring, he was the youngest coach in the NHL, and over his tenure, he guided the Blackhawks to a record of 87, 92, and 26 for a disappointing .488 points percentage. And obviously, he was fired because of the lack of success that he had with the Blackhawks. And obviously, I've seen a lot of Blackhawks fans laugh and say, oh, this is such a silly hire. But Colleton is coming here with an opportunity to, redeem himself, be an assistant coach, be in the NHL, and work his way up to being a head coach again. I mean, shoot, it worked out for Andrew Burnett and Travis Green, respectfully. So it's not impossible to think that Jeremy Colleton can't come in and help. Now, Jeremy Colleton reportedly is coming in to be in charge of the power play and offense. So it'll be really interesting to see what he can do to help this offense moving forward, especially when it's healthy. Also, it should be mentioned that Colleton was originally named an assistant coach for Team Canada at the 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing before taking over the head coaching duties when Claude Julien was unable to serve in the capacity due to an injury. So, Colleton, for a guy who I believe is only 39, has had a lot of experience. Not only as a player, he played in the early 2000s, was an 03 draft pick by the New York Islanders. He's coached not only at the minor league level, but at the NHL level and even internationally. So this guy brings a lot of experience, and I'm always on board with bringing in guys that are, even if they're young, bring in a lot of experience, can help this team. And I think Jeremy Colleton can certainly do that. So I'm curious to see what he can do with Sheldon Keefe and what he can bring. So again, the Devils, with the hiring of Jeremy Colleton as assistant coach, have officially finalized their coaching staff for the 2024-25 season. And so, again, we now know what the coaching staff, is going to be about. And now it's about what can Tom Fitzgerald can do to improve this team in terms of putting pieces together. Now, let's shift over to talking a little bit about the Four Nations face-off, which is something that's been, brought up before, and we finally got some news talking about it. So this past Saturday, the NHL announced the Four Nations face-off tournament, which will be an in-season tournament for the NHL. The league announced that Canada, Finland, Sweden, and the United States will be 4 teams participating. Gary Bettman did say that if all goes well, that this is something that they can obviously expand to other countries as well. So some guys like a Nico Hischier or even, a Timo Meyer and a Jonas Siegenthaler are not going to be in this at all. No Andre Palat either. But the Devils could still have some guys going anyway. The tournament is set to take place from February 12th to February 20th, so a little bit more than a week in 2025. The two host cities will be Montreal and Boston, with a championship game at TD Garden in Boston. The first 6 members of each team are set to be announced on June 28th, right before the NHL draft, which is also going to be starting on June 28th of this year at the Sphere in Vegas. The NHL has not participated in the Olympics since Sochi back in 2014, and there hasn't been a World Cup tournament since that famous one in 2016. And a lot of us have been begging for international play involving the best players in the world here in the NHL. And now we get somewhat of a best-on-best tournament, although, again, there are other countries that needed and should be added moving forward. The Four Nations face-off will have a round robin with each team playing 3 games. It'll follow NHL rules rather than any adjusted international play rules. The scoring system for the round robin will be the 3-2-1 system many people have been asking for in the NHL. So if you win, it's 3 points. I think if you win in overtime or shootout, that's 2 points. And if you end up losing in the shootout or overtime, it is 1 point. And obviously, if you lose in regulation, 0 points. A regulation win will earn 3 points in the standings. Overtime shootout will earn 2. And as I said before, the 2 teams at the top of the standings after their 3 games will play in a match on February 20th, 2025 to fight for the championship. And guys like Jack Hughes and Luke Hughes are certainly candidates to play for Team USA, while Dougie Hamilton and Dawson Mercer could certainly be candidates for Canada, and Jesper Bratt and maybe Alexander Holtz, if he A, is still on this team, and B, if he can certainly have a good season this upcoming year, could be there for Sweden. So that is officially what we are going to expect from this in-season tournament with the Four Nations face-off in February. So let me know what you guys think of this. Do you think it's going to be good? Are you excited about it? Are you not? Let me know what you guys think. Would really, really love to know your thoughts on this. And last but certainly not least here, we are going to talk really quickly about our local women's hockey team, PWHL New York. And I know some people have wondered, why did I start covering it? The reality is that it's still local hockey. I'm a big supporter of women's sports. I watched the PWHL this year. I watched the finals between Minnesota and Boston. Was phenomenal. And the fact that we have a local team that played 2 games at the Prudential Center at the end of this year, I feel that it's important to talk about. And I'm going to name this segment something else later on this year. And I have some other segments that I'm going to name as well, so we can bring a little bit more, add some new things to this podcast as well that I'm very excited to share with you guys in the upcoming months. But let's talk about the PWHL New York team, because the PWHL draft just happened this past Monday. It was held at the Roy Wilkins Auditorium in Minnesota, home to the now defending Walter Cup champions of the PWHL, their inaugural season, PWHL Minnesota. They won the first ever cup in a thrilling 5-game series over PWHL Boston. And unfortunately for the New York team, they finished with only 6 wins on the year, was without question the worst team in the league. And by them winning their last game of the year, they actually, because the last game of the year between the 2 worst teams determined, and the winner would determine who won the first overall pick, PWHL New York earned the first overall pick in this year's draft. And I just want to really show you really quickly this really cool logo for the draft here for Minnesota. It's very, very cool. And hopefully maybe next year the draft could be in New York somewhere. I think that would be really, really cool for her. But I just wanted to show you guys really quickly. But with the first overall pick in this year's PWHL draft, PWHL New York selected a fairly local player, and that is Sarah Fillier, a 24-year-old center out of Princeton University down in South New Jersey as the number 1 overall pick. And this are her accolades showing you why she is deserving of being the number 1 overall pick. 2024 AHCA second team All-American, a 2024 top 10 Patty Kazmaier Award finalist for Best Women's Hockey Player, 2024 USCHO second team, 2024 first team All ECAC, 2024 first team All Ivy League. She finished with 30 goals and 43 points this year, and she just had a phenomenal year. And she is for many people, considered to be a once in a generational talent. And New York was very lucky to be able to draft her. So congratulations, Sarah Fillier, of being drafted number 1, and welcome to the New York, New Jersey area. And I'm very excited to see what she can bring to this New York team. Now, let me also give you guys a recap of the entire draft that New York had. They did have a big trade with Boston, where they traded the 7th overall pick, because it was only 6 teams, so it went through 6 picks in the next round. Trade the 7th overall pick and another pick to acquire 3 picks, including the number 10, and they ended up with 8 selections in this draft, which is more than any other team because they really, really wanted to add super talent to this team. So here is who New York drafted as well, along with Sarah Fillier. They drafted in the 2nd round Maya Nyland Pearson, a 23-year-old right-handed defenseman. In the 3rd round, they drafted Nora Tolis, a 28-year-old center. Also in the 3rd round, they drafted 23-year-old right-handed defenseman Allison Simpson. In the 4th round, they drafted 25-year-old center Gabby Rosenthal. Ellie Hardy, a 23-year-old center, was drafted in the 5th round. Also in the 5th round, New York added a goalie Kaylee Osborne. She's 22 years of age. And then in the last round, or at least the last round for them, in the 6th round, they drafted Emmy Fecteau, a 25-year-old center. And many people have said over the last couple of days that New York is one of the teams that really, really dominated this draft. They did a great job of getting a lot of talent, not only with Sarah Fillier, and this is a team that could have a major, major bounce back after a very, very tough first year that saw them finish in dead last and even lose their head coach. And that's where we'll talk about in just a minute who New York ended up hiring as their next head coach. But it should also mention that they did make one re-signing, and that is goaltender Cornine Schroeder. They signed her to a 2-year contract extension. She played 15 games for New York last year, and she recorded the first ever PWHL shutout on January 1st in Toronto, which was the first ever game for the PWHL. And she finished the year with a .930 save percentage, leading her to be voted as one of the 3 finalists for the 2024 PWHL Goaltender of the Year. So she's clearly going to be the backbone of this team, and it's a big, big job by New York to get her re-signed moving forward. Now, talking about head coach, as I was mentioning before, the PWHL New York team did already have to find their second head coach, and they did, as they hired Craig Fargo to be the next head coach of the New York team. He joins after coaching at Colgate University for the past 12 years as a head coach of their women's hockey program. Before his time in Colgate, Fargo served as the head coach for the women's hockey team at Elmira College, and his all-time NCAA head coaching record sits at an impressive 334, 170, and 39, which includes a 255, 147, and 34 record at Colgate University. And during his tenure at Colgate, Fargo coached PWHL New York players Jesse Eldridge and Olivia Zafuto. He also coached Jamie Bernabaz while serving as an assistant coach for Canada at the 2016 IIHF Under-18 Women's World Championship, where they earned a silver medal. So he comes with a very impressive resume and gets his first crack at being a professional women's hockey head coach. So a lot of new things going on for PWHL New York. It's going to be very exciting to see what they can do in year number 2. And they won't be PWHL New York for much longer because PWHL did announce that nicknames and logos for all teams will be announced in late summer, probably towards the end of August. Some other kind of news here to keep in touch. Teams have through June 20th, so about a week from the time you guys are listening to this, to re-sign players. Free agency begins on June 21st, and the season is expected to start in late November with a 30-game regular season for all the teams, and there will also be more neutral sites. So that'll be interesting as they're going to try to take the league a little bit more on the road, so to speak, to try to grow the game even more. So bottom line is that it's an exciting time for women's sports. It's certainly an exciting time for women's hockey, and I'm very excited to see what PWHL New York can do in year number 2. But going back to the Devils, ladies and gentlemen, we just continue to get closer and closer to what I believe is going to be a very, very exciting and a very, very, crazy offseason for this New Jersey Devils team. And all we can do is sit back, relax, and enjoy this crazy ride.